Senator Ted Cruz sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was part of President George W. Bush's 2000 Florida recount team. And Senator, it's always an honor to have you on this program. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Maria. It's good to be with you.
First, assess where we are. You heard this weekend what we saw in terms of President-elect and Vice President-elect from the media. What do you believe is the status of this race?
Well, I think that is way premature. At this point, we do not know who has prevailed in the election. The media is desperately trying to get everyone to coronate Joe Biden as the next president, but that's not how it works. The media does not get to select our president. The American people get to elect our president. And at this point, we've got numerous states that are very closely and vigorously contested, from Pennsylvania to Georgia to Arizona to New Mexico to Michigan to Wisconsin. In all of those states, there are serious disputes about the vote totals, and there's a legal process to resolve those disputes. So at this point, we should allow the rule of law to operate. We should allow the legal process to move forward. And when that process is concluded, which it will be in a matter of weeks, we will know who prevailed in the elections. But the fact that the big newsrooms in New York City want Donald Trump to lose, they don't get to decide that. That's a question for the voters.
We are looking at multiple recounts in multiple states. We just heard from Rudy Giuliani. He's going to be dropping a lawsuit in Pennsylvania tomorrow. Other lawsuits throughout the week. He said by the end of the week, he'll have 5 lawsuits, and there are 10 states, he says, that are potentially stolen. 800,000 votes in question, according to Rudy Giuliani. Walk us through the process. You are a constitutionalist, an expert on the Supreme Court. How does this work in terms of the federal court system with these lawsuits pending?
Well, we've seen multiple lawsuits already filed. I expect there will be more lawsuits filed, probably in each of those states that I mentioned, and maybe more. We may well see cases filed both in state court and in federal court. We will have trials on the matters that are contested. And the purpose of a trial is to hear evidence. We're hearing lots of allegations of a dead person voted. We heard a report from one county in Michigan where the election software mistakenly counted 6,000 votes that were cast for Donald Trump. It switched them to Joe Biden. Now, they apparently caught that. But that same software is used in 47 counties throughout Michigan. That needs to be examined to determine that there's not a problem counting the votes. And the legal process is how you resolve those questions. You know, one of the frustrating things, just as an American watching this, is you hear all these allegations of what's going on, and it's hard to know what the facts are. It's hard to know what the truth is. Well, we have a process for ascertaining the truth, which is that you can go and present evidence and test it in a court of law, and then those appeals will go up both through the state appellate system and the federal appellate system, and this case could very easily end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, you mentioned Bush versus Gore, which I was part of representing then Governor George W. Bush. In the course of 36 days, we had multiple cases throughout the state of Florida. It went twice to the Florida Supreme Court. It went twice to the U.S. Supreme Court. It took 36 days to resolve, and we got an answer. I would expect a similar process to play out here, despite the media trying to tell everyone, give up, go home, we know who we want to win. That's not how it works. We need to follow the law, and that means allowing the legal process to play out.
So we did not learn about the results from Gore versus Bush until December of that year, right?
Yeah, that's right. And if you look at the federal statute that governs the timing of presidential elections, it actually anticipates that there will be recounts, that there will be contested litigation. If you look at the federal statute, December 12th is the date that the electors meet to vote. December 8th is what's called the safe harbor deadline, which is that any contest election before that, if it's resolved, that resolution is presumed valid. So the federal statute anticipates that there are going to be contests, there are going to be recounts. And here's one dynamic that's important to understand. Particularly in this COVID time, this has been a strange election. On Election Day, Donald Trump won a large majority of the votes counted on Election Day. That was true throughout the country. With mail-in votes that were early votes, Joe Biden won a significant majority of the mail-in votes that came in. Now, in several states, we're going to see a recount process. A recount process, you look at those votes, you determine if they're accurate, if they're fraudulent, if they have sufficient signatures, if they meet the statutory standards for a legal vote. What is interesting is historically, mail-in votes are much more likely to be disqualified in a recount than in-person votes. Generally, in-person votes, they're conducted at the polling place and then they usually stand. That means what we're likely to see in the next few weeks as the recounts go forward is that Joe Biden's very, very narrow majorities in some of these states, those totals are likely to drop if we see mail-in votes when they're examined being invalidated as contrary to the law. And so we could easily see, I believe President Trump still has a path to victory, and that path is to count every single legal vote that was cast, but also not to cast any votes that were fraudulently cast or illegally cast. And we have a legal process to determine what's legal and what isn't.
Understood. I want to switch gears, ask you about the balance of power in the Senate ahead of these runoff races in January in Georgia. If you have a Chuck Schumer as majority leader, what does that look like? Tell me about the importance of this January runoff race, what it will mean for kitchen table issues for all of us.
Yeah. Well, the next 2 months are extraordinarily important. It looks like right now in the Senate we're 52-48. The media still hasn't called North Carolina Tom Tillis, but it looks like Tom has a significant lead and is going to win that race. If that's the case, it means there are 2 Republican senators in a runoff in Georgia. That runoff is going to occur on January 5th. If the total is 52-48, if the Democrats win both of those seats, we have a Democratic Senate, assuming Joe Biden is president and Kamala Harris is vice president. If the Democrats win Georgia, they have a majority. If Republicans win, we have a majority. I cannot overstate how important to the country those 2 seats are. I'll be traveling to Georgia. I've spoken with both David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, the 2 senators. I've told them I'm all in. Anything I can do to help, the answer is yes. And the difference, if we have a Chuck Schumer Senate and a Joe Biden presidency, they will pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They will end the filibuster. They will pass massive tax increases. They will pass the Green New Deal, destroying millions of jobs. If we have a Republican Senate, none of that happens. And so it really is. By the way, if they have a Democratic Senate, they'll add 2 new states to the country to give them, they believe, 4 new Democratic senators. So if you want to check, hopefully Joe Biden does not prevail at the end of this. But if you want to check on Joe Biden, if you don't want to go over the edge to the socialist abyss, Georgia is the big enchilada. I'm going to be there, and everyone who wants to see some semblance of calm and reason and sanity, Georgia's the battle where that's going to be determined.
Understood, Senator. It's great to see you, and pick up the senator's book, One Vote Away. Senator Ted Cruz, good to see you this morning. Thank you, sir.